What is up, everybody? Welcome to another Thursday video with Sam, the day before the Pro Tour. Very excited. So what I wanted to do today is I wanted to go over a few decks that we have tested out in the last 2 weeks on stream, twitch.tv/SamBot49. So you can check me out there live. Coming up tonight, 4 a.m. Eastern Time to about 10 a.m. Eastern Time when the Pro Tour starts. So that's starting around 10 a.m. CEST, so you can check all that out. But I want to start with what I think is the front runner here, Teamer, Aetherworks Marvel, and then we'll kind of go down the list and get to some brews that I really think show promise as well. So Teamer Aetherworks Marvel is a very simple deck. You make energy. Use that energy to trigger Aetherworks Marvel. You look at the top 6 of your cards. Hopefully there's an Ulamog. You put it into play. Sometimes on turn 4, you destroy 2 of your opponent's things. Sometimes lands if it's on turn 4. You attack twice for 10. And you win the game. As simple as that, right? What's spicy in this deck is the Nissa Steward of Elements and the 2 Bounty of Luxas, both from the new set. Bounties give you some extra game against control game 1 and help you go a little deeper, while Nissas kind of get you through the mid-game against some of the, let's call them mid-range Jundwalkers or, you know, green-black based creature decks in which you don't have a Marvel or are stuck with too many Ulamogs in your hand. Nissa and Bounty kind of help bridge that gap. So with these new cards, it's much easier to cast an Ulamog. It's also, you also just, you know, add a little bit of value town to the deck. You can deal with things with Harness of Lightning, Chandra, Torch of Defiance. You also have Woodweave of Pleasant to gain a bunch of life. This deck is notoriously fantastic against aggro decks just because it's doing something very unfair, often winning on turn 4, putting the aggro deck in a position that it's impossible to come back from. You also have enough removal and life gain to get out of, like, sticky situations. So I really like this option. It's good against Mardu. It's good against green-black. It's bad against control, though. And that's kind of why there's the 3 negate in the sideboard. I mean, and the Tireless Trackers and the Bristling Hydras. You need some way to beat control postboard, and that's kind of the way. Now, that doesn't mean that this deck won't see a lot of play, won't beat some control decks, but Negate and Ceremonious Rejection are this deck's worst enemy. So if I'm playing Mardu, I'm considering splashing a few Spirebluff Canals in order to play some Ceremonious Rejections, or if I think this deck is going to be huge, I'm considering playing a control deck with Negates possibly in the main deck. So this is a deck that I think is very competitive and has a great shot at winning. Another deck that has the same colors, but a little different twist, is this Teamer Tower deck. Now, we have the 4th, I should say, Torrential Gearhulk in the sideboard, which is interesting. We're on a similar control sideboard plan, right, where we have Bristling Hydras and Tireless Trackers and Long Tusk Cubs and Negates and Dispels. We're signing out all of our Harness Lightnings, our Magma Sprays, our Sweltering Suns, even some of our towers. So this does a similar thing, right, where against control, because we have removal main deck and because we have a win condition that you can basically negate away in Dynavolt Tower, we need to bring creatures in to kind of mess with their game plan, right? They're bringing in negates and dispels and things like that, so we want to bring in creatures so that, you know, we interact well, or we basically want them to bring in the gates and we bring in creatures because that's good for us in general. So that's kind of what we're trying to do here. This deck I think is a little less competitive than Aetherworks Marvel. It's not as good against aggressive decks just because we're not doing something unfair, so they can sometimes sneak under us, although Dynavolt Tower is fantastic. I think it's pretty much the same against mid-range decks. You're going to grind out most decks with the tower, just being able to shoot things down, a Gearhulk block, get more value. And I think it's much better against control decks. So if you're expecting a lot of control in the meta, you want to play a fun kind of artifact-based combo-y deck, this is a good choice as well. So now we go down to a deck that has seen some success on the SCG tournament circuit, and that is Red, White, Humans, right? This is a deck everyone should be at least a little familiar with. You have the Glorybound Initiates, you have the Thalias to kind of pump everything, you have the Always Watchings to pump everything, you have Hanwar Garrisons just giving you maximum value, and the Honored Crop Captains. A few cast outs, you know, just for some extra oomph. People are going to play Gideon, either Gideon 3 or Gideon 4 in some of these spots, right? If you were to put Gideon in this deck, I'd recommend taking out these 2 Thalias. They do a little bit, but not a ton. So this is a deck that just gets under the decks, right? It's not great against Tower. As we saw, they have Sweltering Suns. It's very good against this deck. And it's not fantastic against Marvel because you can't always kill on turn 4 even on the play, right? Your best draws like Expedition Envoy into Glorybound, Earned Honor Crop Captain, into like Glory-bound Initiate, Thalia's Lieutenant, or into some like 3-drop like Hanwar Garrison into like Thalia's Lieutenant, whatever, and that sometimes wins, but that doesn't always do 20 damage in time. And if they just like Ulamog, kill 2 of your guys, block another guy, and they, you know, have an extra blocker or an extra something, or they gain 6 life, you're in a little bit of trouble there. So this is a deck that is good. It has game against Marvel just because it puts them on the back foot, and sometimes even an Ulamog isn't enough for them to come back from. It has not as much game against Tower, though, so it's going wide, which gives it game against Marvel, right? Because Marvel is trying to kill things with Ulamog and then make up all the difference by blocking with Ulamog. So you have more game against Marvel in this deck, but you have less game against Tower because once Dynavolt Tower gets going, you know, it kind of just starts picking off your dudes. So that's kind of where this deck stands. I would still consider it a favor against both. Now, the bad part is that this deck isn't great against green-black, and it's also not great against the straight control decks with Fumigates and Sweltering Suns. So there you go. This is definitely a competitive list, though. So now we're going to move on to something a little more outside the box, but just as competitive, I think, as this, and that is the white-black zombies list. The worst part of this deck is the 2 Aether Hubs that you basically have to play because you need... You know, I mean, this right here is 9. You basically need 11 sources in your 20-land deck to cast Binding Mummies and Wayward Servants. A lot of the white splash zombie decks here have just been playing Binding Mummies, or have just been playing Wayward Servants, but I love Binding Mummy. It makes the green-black matchup a breeze. It makes some of the aggro matchups a breeze because you can Crypt Breaker on their turn to tap things down. Gives you a lot of play. Wayward Servant gives you a ton of play in the aggro matchup. Scrap Heap Scrounger, the reason there's 2 here, gives you a ton of play in the control matchup. So I really like this deck. I think the only truly horrific matchup is Marvel because Marvel's doing something unfair and we can't win fast enough. So that's pretty much this. Now, another pet deck of mine that I've been trying out a bit lately is this 4-color... well, I have it set to 5-color right now, but this 4 to 5-color control deck specialized around Planeswalkers. Now, what this is fantastic against is, of course, control, right? If you're expecting to see a lot of control, maybe in a fight for Tower, this is a place to be. You have the negates and the ceremonious reduction, so you have game against Tower, games 2 and 3. You have game against aggro decks with Sweltering Suns, Harness Lightnings, Oaths, creatures to block. And you have a ton of game against control. You just have way too many threats for them. Your Spring to Minds, Flashback, your Bristling Hydras, and Tireless Trackers get a ton of value in games 1 games 2 and 3 also, but especially game 1. This is where I want to be if it's a control-heavy meta. You know, I wanna be in a place where I can basically fight on unfair terms, right? They have to bring in both negates and Essence Scatters against this deck, and sometimes that doesn't even work. They don't know if they need to bring in sweepers or not. It's a very tough situation for them. Our Harness Lightnings are not dead game 1. Our Sweltering Suns is not dead game 1. Our Oath of Chandra is not even dead game 1, because sometimes, you know, they can take 6 to 8 damage from it. So I really like this deck in a control-heavy meta. Again, struggles a bit versus Tower. So the last deck, and the deck that I've been testing most recently, is this New Perspectives control deck. So for those of you unfamiliar with this deck, it's a little interesting. What happens is, basically, and the sideboard doesn't really matter, but I'll put it all here for you. Now, if you want one of these lists, I suggest just screenshotting, and you know, you can get it there. But anyway, so what happens with this deck is you play a land, you play a land. You play a land, you Weirding Wood onto a land, you get a clue. You play a land, you sacrifice that clue. So we have not done anything until turn 4. Turn 5, we play an untapped land. We cast New Perspectives. We draw 3 cards. We should have like 7 to 8 cards in hand now. Then we start cycling for free. We get to some Viziers, right? We untap. We play a Vizier. We cycle a Vizier. Right, you get to untap target permanent. We untap the land with Weirding Wood. We tap for 2 mana. We cycle another Vizier. We untap the Weirding Wood. We tap it for maybe some black. We play Shallow Grave, we get all of our stuff back. We cycle to our next Vizier, right? Or we traverse to a Vizier, or we Chef It Monitor to open up some lands. But you keep doing this over and over again until you got to 7 mana. You cast Approach of the Second Sons, right? If you're playing against a control deck, you can cast Sphinx first and then Approach, so that's a pretty good way to go about it as well, if you need to sneak it in, right? Because Sphinx makes all your spells uncounterable. So then you sneak in Approach to the Second Sons. You keep doing this. Now, be careful not to deck yourself. That's really important here. But we keep doing this until we cast Approach to the Second Sons for the second time. and win the game. Is this competitive? I don't know. I do know of at least one person that's playing it at the PT, though. They were in my chat this morning. I don't know how good it is. I don't know how bad it is. I don't know any of that information, but I know it's been a lot of fun for me. So if I was at the PT tomorrow, I think I would choose to play Marvel. My second choice would be White Black Zombies. For FNM, I think this would be my choice. It's just a ton of fun. Fights on a totally different axis. It's great. It's like probably really fun to go off in person, so I would really enjoy that. And actually, there may be too much shuffling. Yeah, maybe I wouldn't want to play this because there's too much shuffling. So I would just play White Black Zombies anyways. It's just my pet deck. I love it. Anyways, thank you everybody so much for watching. Hopefully you learned something. What are your predictions for the Pro Tour starting tomorrow? Let me know in the comment section down below. I'll be there chatting with you guys. And once again, thank you so much for hanging out today.